Eleanor swallowed her first real tear the day the doctor told her, "You're on your own now." Michael was only 2 years old. His father existed only on paper, a name in a file, a memory Eleanor rarely spoke about. She stared at the blank walls of the hospital room, her small son in her arms, and for a moment, the world seemed impossibly heavy. There were no grandparents nearby, no distant relatives ready to help. Just her, a fragile woman carrying the weight of an entire life on her shoulders. That was the day Eleanor made a silent vow. She would never beg, never complain, never let anyone see her falter. She would give everything to Michael, even if it meant losing herself in the process. The first few months were endless. Days blurred into nights. She learned how to feed him with one hand while tending to the house with the other. She discovered that exhaustion could be compartmentalized, tucked into the corners of her mind like a secret she could share with no one. Nights were the hardest. Michael would cry endlessly, and Eleanor would hold him through fevers she could barely handle herself. She never cried aloud, fearing it might frighten him. Instead, she let the tears fall quietly when he finally slept, hidden behind closed doors. She worked 2 jobs. Early mornings at a small bakery meant bread and pastries, the smell of dough rising in the air like a fragile hope. Nights were spent cleaning offices, scrubbing floors, folding papers, anything that kept food on the table. Her hands became rough, her back ached constantly. But when Michael woke up and said, "Mom, I'm hungry," she smiled and felt a quiet satisfaction no one else could understand. To her, success was not a paycheck. Success was seeing him grow happy and safe, feeling loved. Years passed, Michael grew up, and Eleanor's sacrifices became invisible, woven seamlessly into the fabric of their lives. She never complained, never demanded recognition. People admired Michael, his confidence, his intelligence, his easy charm, and they would say to Eleanor, "You did a great job raising him." She would nod politely, smiling, keeping the depth of her exhaustion and sacrifice hidden behind a calm exterior. She knew no one could ever truly understand the magnitude of her devotion, and she didn't need them to. Then Rachel came into Michael's life. She was beautiful, polished, always perfectly composed. At first, Eleanor welcomed her with a tentative optimism, giving space where she could, stepping back from the kitchen, lowering her voice in the living room. She even packed away Michael's childhood memorabilia, believing Rachel needed space to make the house feel like home. Eleanor told herself it was normal for a new wife to adjust. That patience would carry them through. But Rachel did not adjust. She replaced. She spoke more to Michael than she spoke to Eleanor. Her voice was calm, polite, precise, but it carried a subtle accusation, a quiet dismissal of Eleanor's presence. At dinner, Eleanor would start to speak, and Michael would stare at his phone. Rachel would finish the conversation for him. "She doesn't understand how things work anymore," Rachel said one evening, casually, as if Eleanor's existence were an inconvenience to their life. Eleanor understood immediately. She had always known. She simply hadn't expected her own son to allow it. Nights were the worst. She would lie awake, listening to laughter coming from Michael's room, the sound a dagger of nostalgia and pain. The boy who once could not sleep without her hand now lived without her presence entirely. Eleanor asked herself quietly, with a hollow ache in her chest, "Am I no longer needed?" The answer came in the form of silence, a quiet, devastating truth. One evening, Rachel spoke again, gently, without raising her voice. "This house feels crowded," she said. Michael didn't argue, didn't question. He only asked, "What do you want me to do?" In that single moment, Eleanor understood fully. When a son does not question, a mother has no place to fight. The final verdict had been delivered, silently, calmly, by those she had once loved most. The next morning, Eleanor packed a small suitcase. Clothes were minimal. More importantly, she packed memories, school certificates, Michael's first drawings, the sweater she had purchased with her first paycheck. She paused at the doorway, eyes sweeping across the house she had built with every ounce of effort she could spare. This house had once been a home. Now it was an address, a monument to absence. Michael followed her to the door. Voice soft, "I'll call you," he said. Eleanor nodded. She knew better than to believe him. Mothers understand when promises are lies, even unspoken ones. Weeks turned into months. Calls became sparse. Occasional, then non-existent. Eleanor lived quietly, never complaining, never calling Michael. She wrote in her diary, "I never wanted gratitude. I just wanted to matter." The simplicity of her statement carried the weight of decades of silent suffering and selfless love. Eventually, Eleanor passed away. Alone, quietly, just as she had lived her life, without recognition, without argument, without drama. Michael received the news in a phone call that shattered every illusion he had clung to. In her hand, they said, was a note. "If you are reading this, my son, know that I never stopped choosing you, even when you stopped choosing me." Michael fell to his knees, grief finally breaking through years of denial and ignorance. The woman who had given him everything, who had sacrificed her life quietly so he could live fully, was gone, and in that absence, he understood the cost of neglect, the depth of unacknowledged love, and the lifelong weight of regret. Michael drove without thinking, hands tight on the steering wheel, the streets blurring past in streaks of orange and white light. Every stop sign, every red light seemed like a reminder of Eleanor's absence. He told himself there had to be a mistake. She couldn't be gone, not Eleanor. She was too strong, too enduring. Mothers didn't disappear quietly, or so he had believed. The nursing home looked smaller than he imagined. Worn with age, the paint faded and the windows grimy. Inside, the smell of antiseptic and old furniture mingled in the air. A nurse greeted him, her voice soft but firm. "I'm sorry," she said. Those words crashed into him like a tidal wave. He followed her down the hallway, past rooms lined with photographs of residents smiling, beside visitors who rarely came. In many of the photos, Eleanor's face would have fit perfectly, hands clasped, gentle smile, a woman who had given everything without demand. The room was at the end. She lay there peaceful still. Too still, Michael felt his chest tighten. This woman had carried him, fought for him, loved him beyond measure, and he had allowed her to drift away without noticing. He knelt beside her bed, trembling. Unable to move closer, he whispered, "I'm here, Mom," though the words felt hollow. Inadequate, he reached for her hand. Cold, empty, final. The nurse handed him an envelope. "She asked us to give this to you," she said. Michael's hands shook as he opened it. Inside, he found a folded photograph, Eleanor holding him as a child, both smiling brightly, and a handwritten note. "Michael, if you're reading this, I didn't get to say goodbye. That's okay. Mothers learn to live with unfinished sentences. I don't blame you, I never did. Love doesn't keep score. Everything I gave you, I gave freely, and I would do it again. Even knowing how it ends, be kind, especially when it's easier not to be. Love, Mom." Michael collapsed onto the floor, sobs racking his body. He hadn't cried like this since he was a child. Not for years, not for decades. Each word of the note pierced him. Each memory it invoked cut deeper than any argument, any conflict, any missed opportunity ever could. The funeral was quiet. Few attended, staff from the nursing home, 2 residents who had shared meals with Eleanor, strangers who barely knew her. No family, no friends. Michael stood by her grave, alone, heart heavy with the realization that her sacrifices had been invisible to the world and to him. Rachel was there, several steps behind, silent, composed, unable or unwilling to acknowledge what had truly been lost. When the coffin was lowered, Michael felt a part of himself being buried alongside it. Every memory, every moment he had taken for granted, every unspoken act of love, the silence was deafening. That night, the house he had once called home felt unbearably empty, the absence of Eleanor more tangible than the walls themselves. He opened her diary, which he had avoided until now. The pages were filled with mundane observations, meals, weather, notes about his growth, but also tender reflections. Michael didn't call today. That's okay. He has a life. I dreamed about him last night. He was little again. He needed me. I miss him, but love doesn't demand. It waits. Each page shattered him. Eleanor had never written anger, never wrote blame, only patience, understanding, and love that never ceased. Michael realized that for decades, he had ignored the quietest, most profound form of devotion, mistaking it for normalcy. Unable to bear it any longer, Michael returned to the nursing home. He sat in the chair Eleanor had spent her final days in, listening to the faint sounds of life around him. A resident approached, an elderly woman who looked as if she had always waited for someone to notice her presence. Michael offered a tentative smile. She smiled back, and in that small exchange, he felt a fragment of Eleanor's enduring influence. Love that required nothing, yet gave everything. Days turned into weeks. Michael began volunteering regularly at the nursing home, not to be forgiven, not to erase the past, but as a penance, as a way to inhabit the space Eleanor had once filled. He baked pies for residents, helped with chores, listened to stories no one else wanted to hear. Each act, however small, was a tribute to her memory, a quiet acknowledgement of the life she had given so freely. Rachel remained distant. Their conversations were brief, polite, devoid of intimacy. She had not caused Eleanor's absence. Michael knew now that the fault had been his own, a lifetime of inattention, of failing to recognize a love that was unwavering. Yet, in his grief and remorse, he slowly began to understand the true lesson Eleanor had imparted. Love does not demand. It endures, and even in absence, it can transform lives. Michael's days grew longer, emptier. He wandered through the apartment he now lived in, staring at walls that once felt like home, but now only echoed with absence. Every object reminded him of Eleanor. The faint smell of baked bread that lingered in the air, the slight warmth of the couch where she had always sat, the small traces of her life hidden in corners he had never noticed. Each reminder was a stab of regret, each silence a testament to the moments he had taken for granted. Sleep became elusive. He tossed and turned, replaying the past. He remembered nights as a child, curled under blankets, Eleanor humming beside him, her hand on his forehead while he slept through fevers. He remembered mornings when she made pancakes shaped like animals, just to see him smile before school. And he remembered how, as a teenager, he had ignored her advice, her gentle words, her silent presence, as if they were unnecessary. He realized now that the silence he had resented in her later years had never been emptiness. It had been love. Quiet, patient, unassuming love. Unable to bear the weight of his own thoughts, Michael began driving aimlessly through the city. Streets blurred, light streaked past, but he felt nothing except the hollow pit in his chest. He drove past the bakery, where Eleanor had worked in the mornings for years. Closed now, the sign above the door was faded. Michael imagined her behind the counter, tired hands dusted with flour, smiling at customers who never really knew her story. He whispered to the empty street, "I'm sorry." Returning home, he faced Eleanor's diary again. The pages had become fragile over time, but the words she had written remained sharp. piercing and profoundly honest. One entry read, "Even when he forgets me, I will always remember him." Another, "Michael didn't call today. That's okay. He has a life. I dreamed about him last night. He was little again. He needed me." Each line made him weep. He had not only forgotten her, he had failed to see her, failed to acknowledge the depth of her sacrifices, failed to return the love she had offered without condition. Weeks passed. Michael returned to the nursing home where Eleanor had spent her last days. He sat in the same chair she had occupied. Staff members recognized him, but he barely noticed them. A resident approached, speaking quietly, sharing memories of Eleanor. Michael listened, tears streaming down his face. For the first time, he began to understand the lives she had touched, the subtle ways her presence had made the world better. He volunteered, he baked pies, he listened to stories, he held hands. Every small act became a tribute, an attempt to reconcile with the loss he had caused, the love he had ignored. He realized now that Eleanor's life had been about giving quietly, enduring patiently, and loving without expectation. Rachel, meanwhile, remained distant. Their occasional conversations were polite but hollow. Michael understood finally that she had not been the cause of Eleanor's absence. He had been. His grief was personal, his guilt, his burden alone. He began to see that the pain he felt was not just for a mother lost. It was for the part of himself he had failed to nurture, the understanding he had neglected, the love he had taken for granted. One afternoon, a woman at the nursing home remarked, "My son doesn't visit anymore." Michael sat beside her, silent for a long moment, then replied softly, "He hasn't forgotten. He just didn't realize what forgetting costs." That night, Michael wrote a letter, not to send but to confess. "Mom, I thought choosing my own happiness meant leaving you behind. I didn't know it would cost me everything else. Your love had a sound, silence, and I ignored it. I live with you now in regret, in memory, in every quiet moment. I hope you knew, I hope you felt loved, even when I failed to show it. Your son." He placed the letter inside Eleanor's diary, pressed it to his chest, and allowed himself to feel the full weight of decades of regret, grief, and realization. Rain began to fall outside, washing the streets clean. Michael stared out the window, understanding at last, some losses cannot be undone, but love, true, enduring love, transforms even in absence. Maz, yet fully expanded Part 3 high. Michael Ka emotional breakdown, guilt, or realization. Michael began waking up before sunrise, not because he wanted to, but because sleep no longer comforted him. Nights were heavy, filled with memories he had ignored for decades. Every shadow, every faint sound reminded him of Eleanor, her sacrifices, her silent endurance, her love that had never demanded but always given. He started noticing things he had overlooked. The way light fell across a table, reminiscent of mornings when Eleanor had left a soft glow in the kitchen to wake him gently. The faint smell of cinnamon and apples from the bakery she had worked at years ago. Even the small rustling of leaves outside his window seemed to whisper her presence. It was as if the city itself remembered her, even when he had failed to. One morning, while cleaning a corner of his apartment, Michael found a small wooden frame tucked behind old boxes. Inside was a handwritten list. His heart skipped. He recognized the handwriting immediately, Eleanor's. The heading read, "Things I Still Want to Do for My Son." The list was simple, yet profoundly emotional. Make his favorite apple pie again. See him laugh without worry. Sit beside him without feeling like a burden. Hear him say, "I'm home," and mean it. No grand gestures, no complaints. Just closeness, patience, love. Michael sank to the floor, gripping the frame as though it could vanish if he let go. All this time, He had thought Eleanor had wanted distance, when in truth she only wanted permission. Permission to stay, to love, to continue being the mother she had always been. He carried the list everywhere that day, to work, to the grocery store, to the bakery she had loved. Each small memory became a thread, reconnecting him to her. At the bakery, he ordered an apple pie. The first bite transported him decades back. The warmth, the sweetness, the safety of childhood. Tears flowed freely. He had taken all of it for granted, and now only memory remained. That night, Michael returned to Eleanor's grave. He knelt beside it, placing the framed list gently on the cold earth. He whispered, voice cracking, "I didn't understand. I thought loving you meant leaving you behind, but loving you meant staying." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying a quiet stillness. Michael stayed until dusk, absorbing the weight of her love, the depth of her patience, and the lesson she had left behind. Some sacrifices are invisible, but their impact is eternal. In the following weeks, Michael began baking apple pies regularly, sharing them with elderly residents at the nursing home. Each smile, each gesture of gratitude, felt like a living thread connecting him to Eleanor. He realized that love doesn't vanish. It transforms. Her love had passed into him, shaping him into someone capable of kindness, patience, and understanding. One evening, Michael found a small envelope in his mailbox. No sender. Inside was a single page, handwritten in Eleanor's flowing script. "My son, if you're reading this, know that love never truly ends. It changes, it grows, it waits. You cannot undo the past, but you can shape what comes next. Be kind, that is all I ever hoped for. You are my greatest joy." Michael pressed the letter to his chest, tears spilling silently. For the first time in decades, he felt a sense of peace, not closure, not absolution, but a responsibility to live as she had loved. Her life had taught him that love is constant, enduring, and that even in absence, it shapes the world in quiet ways. He walked through the nursing home hallways, offering pies and smiles, sitting with those who had been forgotten by the world. Each act was a tribute to Eleanor, a way to honor her memory by becoming the love she had taught him to give. And in that simple, profound act, Michael finally understood her ultimate lesson. You cannot undo loss, but you can live in a way that preserves love, transforms grief into kindness, and keeps the memory of those you lost alive in every action, every word, every heartbeat. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, feeling her presence not as absence, but as guidance, and for the first time in his life, he truly felt home. Months had passed since Michael had started living differently, baking pies, volunteering, sitting with the elderly, small acts that carried Eleanor's legacy forward. But even with all his efforts, a hollow ache remained in his chest. Guilt was not something that could ever fully fade. It had become part of him, a shadow that reminded him to cherish what mattered most. One rainy afternoon, Michael returned home from the nursing home, the streets slick and glistening under streetlights. A small, unmarked package waited on his doorstep. Inside was a photograph, Eleanor, sitting on the couch from his childhood home, holding him as a baby, both smiling. On the back was a note, "I will always be with you. Don't forget to live, don't forget to love. Mom." Michael fell to his knees, clutching the photograph to his chest. Every memory, her late-night lullabies, her careful hands wiping away tears, the way she had let him fail only to teach him resilience, flooded him all at once. He had spent decades blind to the quiet, selfless love she had given, and now, even in death, she was teaching him still. He sat alone that night, reflecting on every choice he had made. Rachel had left months ago, unable to live in the shadow of Eleanor's absence and his grief. Michael knew now that he could not blame her. He had failed Eleanor first, failed to see, failed to appreciate, and it was his burden alone to carry. The following morning, he returned to the nursing home, carrying a tray of freshly baked pies. The residents smiled as he walked through the hallways, recognizing a gentleness they had seen only in Eleanor. Every interaction was a step toward redemption, a silent act of love carried forward. He realized something profound. Eleanor's love had never been lost, it had transformed through him, touching others in ways he could not have imagined. That evening, he knelt at Eleanor's grave once more, holding the photograph and a small apple pie. The wind whispered through the trees, as if carrying her presence. He whispered aloud, voice breaking, "Mom, I finally understand. I finally see everything. I will live the way you loved me." The sky darkened, and rain began to fall softly. Michael didn't move. He sat there, listening to the rhythm of the world, understanding that some lessons are not learned until it is almost too late. And Eleanor's love, silent, patient, eternal, was the greatest lesson of all. Weeks later, Michael found a small envelope among Eleanor's belongings, one that had somehow been overlooked. The handwriting froze him in place. "My son, if you're reading this, know that love never truly ends. It changes, it grows, it waits. You cannot undo the past, but you can shape what comes next. Be kind, that is all I ever hoped for. You are my greatest joy." Michael pressed the letter to his chest, finally allowing tears to flow without restraint. For the first time in decades, grief felt not like punishment, but like a guide. Every act of kindness he performed, every smile he shared, every hand he held carried Eleanor's love forward. He walked back through the hallways of the nursing home, offering pies and company to those who had long been forgot. Each interaction was a testament to Eleanor's legacy, a living proof that love endures even when life ends. Michael finally understood the ultimate lesson she had left him. Loss cannot be undone, but love can be carried forward. Regret can transform into compassion. Silence can teach louder than words. And the only true way to honor those who gave everything is to live with the same selfless love they did. Michael sat down beside an elderly man, staring at the wall. "Do you want some pie?" he asked. The man looked up slowly, nodded. Michael smiled gently. In that moment, he felt Eleanor's presence, as if she were right beside him, not as absence but as guidance. The love she had poured into him all those years had become a living force, shaping every action, every heartbeat, every choice. Outside, the sun set in golden light, casting a soft glow across the city. Michael finally understood that some endings are not about closure, they are about transformation. He had lost her physically, but her love remained, eternal and guiding. And in that realization, he felt home.